This week just gone was Smash, Australia's biggest anime convention. One of the best things about Smash is seeing all the incredibly talented cosplayers displaying their skills. People come from all across Australia, and we're always absolutely blown away by the talent and dedication of the Australian cosplay community. Smash is also special because they host the Australian preliminaries of the World Cosplay Summit, with the winner being chosen to represent Australia in Japan. The WCS is an international cosplay competition held in Japan every year that promotes international exchange through Japanese pop culture and specifically cosplay. It is one of the most prestigious cosplay competitions in the world. For this episode, I spoke to Dr. Emerald King about the history of cosplay in Australia. The episode was recorded in the week leading up to Smash. Emerald is extremely knowledgeable about all things cosplay, and I hope you enjoy our chat. Well, hello, and welcome back to Gateway to Anime. How are you all? What's going on? We are the podcast where we throw open the gates to anime, where we deep dive into the classics as well as bring you the best new anime. Ever wanted to get into anime but didn't know where to start? Then we are the podcast for you. Now, Charlie is not with me tonight, unfortunately. Our parents are in town, and one of us had to field that, and one of us had to get to work. So I am here, very, very excited with my guest today, just me and my incredible guest, Dr. Emerald King. Dr. King, how are you?
I'm feeling incredibly guilty now. Thrilled to be here and excited to hopefully give relevant facts, interesting details, and maybe drop a few hints.
Oh, very excited. So I'm just going to read out a little bit of Dr. Emerald King's bio so you all understand to whom you are listening to today. So, Dr. Emerald King is currently a lecturer in humanities, global culture, and languages at the University of Tasmania. She's also an award-winning cosplayer, which is why we've got her on the show. Emerald's research is divided between Japanese women's writing and masochistic theory, cosplay as fans translation, and shoujo girls manga and culture. As part of Emerald's cosplay research, she's competed and won a number of prizes, most notably winning the 2016 finals of the Madman National Cosplay Competition and placing second in 2018, as well as placing in the finals of Australian World Cosplay Summit preliminaries in 2018 and 19. Emerald has worked as a volunteer translator and interpreter for the WCS finals in Japan from 2017, and in 2020, she was named a WCS Support Ambassador. So we are in incredible company today. So before we dive more into like your specific current endeavors, I just want to get into your backstory. I want you to tell us as well what cosplay is and how it emerged as a cultural phenomenon, and then we'll dive into your specific backgrounds. But what is cosplay for those who don't know?
Okay. Cosplay in its simplest form is dressing up as your favorite character. Or maybe a character that you don't like very much, but you've been asked to join a group and you don't want to be left out, and so you're just going to do it anyway, and maybe you enjoy the character. So in its simplest form, it is a very fancy way of dressing up. In my academic work, and that's the way that my origin story is through academia. In my academic work, I use a really obsolete definition which focuses on Japanese origin, so dressing up as characters from anime, manga, and live action like tokusatsu, so like Godzilla. But interestingly, in English language usage, we have cosplay almost replacing words like fancy dress, like dress-ups, like costume. All of that has almost been replaced in some areas. And the other thing that's really interesting that's happened in like the last 5 years is that cosplay has come to be used as a derogative, which I find really interesting. So when there was the Balenciaga line that came out 2 years ago, it was a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was the distressed, the poverty line. Mm-hmm. And so there was this whole thing of people like Kim Kardashian cosplaying as a poor. So that's a really interesting usage of the term. In Japanese language, cosplay completely has replaced any earlier terms such as kaso, which is costume, and it is for any kind of dress up, from Halloween style dress up to sexy dress ups, and to anime, manga, amekomi, any kind of IP and popular culture dressing up.
Interesting. And how did you first come to cosplay yourself?
Okay. Please feel free to restrain me at any moment. because like I will drop a full lecture in any second.
What we're here for. This is very exciting.
I was thinking about this earlier today, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm actually a second generation, so second child of cosplay in Australia. So cosplay in Australia really starts in the late 1990s, early 2000s. I started in 2007. I was doing my PhD here at the University of Tasmania, and my local anime event asked me to do a talk on magical girls. And I thought, if I'm going to talk about magical girls, I need to dress like a magical girl. Holic from Clamp had just come out.
Right on.
It was the Spider Lady arc, so I guess she's kind of like an anti-magical girl. So I made a little Shantung silk baby doll dress, played eBay roulette, and bought a shake and go blonde wig from China that arrived just in time, and I haven't stopped cosplaying ever since. That was nearly 20 years ago.
Right on.
So I started mid-2000s. So that's where I think the second generation starts. Then we get a third generation that starts around about 2013. And now we're kind of in the post-COVID generation.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Did you start at conventions? Is that, because it feels to me like convention culture is very much synonymous with cosplay. I mean, of course, it's not essential, but it feels like the community mostly sets their calendar, especially in Australia, and I'm sure it's the same around the world, but to conventions. Is that correct?
So for Australian cosplay, it's very much been event driven. If we look at that kind of first generation, the very first event that happens on the East Coast, my colleagues in WA would have other stories, but the origin story that is best known happens in 1999. There are 4 anime clubs from the Melbourne universities who get together. They have a barbecue. There are a couple of people who have either just come back from exchange in Japan, or who are Japanese Australians, or who are exchange students or international students. They wear cosplay to this like anime barbecue. The next year, they decide to turn it into a proto-convention. So we've had sci-fi conventions before. So SwanCon comes out of the sci-fi convention. So this would eventually become Manifest. Manifest, I believe, would run for 14 years. And it was the model for university-based anime, manga, popular culture conventions. So often with a cosplay competition, some kind of artist alley or industry alley, and then screenings, originally kind of dodgy pirate screenings. And then at the same time as events like Manifest are growing, we have industries like Madman growing up as well. Madman becomes a central pillar of Australian convention scene up until they're bought out by Funimation and then Crunchyroll. Let's not talk about that. But Madman becomes a central pillar for those early events. They booth at cons, and they also arrange for screenings.
So Madman, because obviously their major thing was bringing anime to Australia through, especially DVDs, but of course through SBS and other forms of distribution. So they were also a key player in the cosplay scene as well. Interesting.
Yeah, so people like Uncle Sly, who you had on a couple of weeks ago.
We do love Sly.
He'd come down to our Tasmania events when we had a university screenings for the Anime Society and for what would eventually become the Popular Culture Society. We'd give him a call and be like, "Hey, we want to do a screening. Can we have permission?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, sure." I don't think you could do that anymore, but
it's a different time.
Early 2000s, all it took was a kind of casual email, and these were educational screenings. So, of course, the rules are different. And even Funimation and Crunchyroll back in the day would allow university societies to screen.
Interesting. Right. Do you think, and this is sort of a slight detour, but do you think that the rise and proliferation of anime streaming in Australia has changed the cosplay culture as well?
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So I talk about these ideas of cosplay generations, but we're also talking about the type of cosplayer and the kind of events that they go to. So early days, there's no resources. Before Madman, you've got Des Mangan and the SBS late night cult video, where I first watched Akira and Perfect Blue and Blood the Last Vampire. So you've got people who were bootlegging their VHSs from Hong Kong and North America. And then when it comes to cosplay, everything's made out of dance time satin, cotton drill, and if you can afford a wig, it's a party kids wig or a mystery wig off eBay. More likely you are either dyeing your hair or using colored hairspray.
Gotcha.
So that's how it starts. But as the technology changes, as streaming changes, you go from having anime societies which have monthly screenings and everybody comes to see the film, because with dial-up, it takes a week to download 30 minutes of anime, right?
Oh, yes.
So it goes from that to people will go to the screening, yeah, but the screening becomes a place where you go to, not necessarily to see the screening, but it's a touch point. It's where you see your friends. I know that in the last death rattles of the then Tasmanian Anime Society, there's been a couple of them, but the one that I'm thinking of that kind of ended in the early 2000s, in its final days, the screening was screening. There were some people watching it, but most people were outside in the sunshine, taking cosplay photos and running around like weebs on a pocky high.
Well, credit to them. But
So that's where it starts.
That's very, very interesting. And I guess you've been fortunate to travel quite a lot with cosplay to the Mecca, Japan itself, to some of the biggest events. What sort of difference do you see over there compared to the Australian scene?
I mean, I think I have to update my bio, because in 2023 I actually won with my cosplay partner and I represented Australia at WCS in 2024, which is what the big nobody check is.
Sorry, that was not on the bio that I read off the internet. I apologize.
There's a couple of them, but because of that, I am possibly the only person who's done WCS the wrong way round. Right. By which I mean, in 2017, I was working at a university in New Zealand. I was head of Japanese, and I managed to get some funding to go on a research trip. I thought that I'd I knew some people who worked at World Cosplay Summit. I knew Ed Hoff. So I just kind of rock up, maybe get some backstage access, and then have a lovely month going to libraries and going to events. I walked into the offices. I didn't leave until 6 p.m. that night, and I spent my entire research trip working as an office lady at the World Cosplay Summit from 10 a.m. until midnight.
Wow.
Translating skits, translating websites, and then I ended up working the event, running backstage and getting cosplayers on and off stage with the university volunteers. Wow. So that was my entry to World Cosplay Summit. Most people, when they volunteer for World Cosplay Summit, they represent their country and then they do volunteer work.
Gotcha.
Whereas I did it the wrong way around. But I've got some publications out of it. So,
Outstanding.
It's all good.
So cool. So how did you first come to anime? What was your first anime? Where did it begin? Because obviously I would assume anime came first,
Mhm.
followed by cosplay. It's often the journey for most people. Yeah, what was your first? How did you find it? What did you get into?
I'm of that generation that grew up watching Astro Boy and Original Voltron without knowing what it was. Saturday morning cartoons.
Yep.
I did Japanese because I loved monkey magic, and I was good at Japanese, and I went on a high school exchange. So through university, I did Japanese because I did kendo, I did sword fighting.
Oh wow.
So I did Japanese sword fighting, I did fencing, I did a bit of SCA, so Society for Creative Anachronism. Lots of nerd stuff with swords. So that's what I did. I actually came to anime very late. So I watched Des Mangan when I was in matric. Sailor Moon was on at 6 a.m. Only time in my life I've ever got up at 6 a.m.
Respect.
Um,
That's what to do it for.
so I had a passing interest when I was in matric, but I never really got into it until I was well into my PhD years. So my PhD is on masochism in Japanese women's literature,
Wow.
and I was going to be like a hardcore, very edi, very important Japanese literary scholar.
For sure.
That was the
That
plan.
was the plan. Yes.
And then cosplay came along, and it was like a dirty little hobby. Like, hi, my name's Emerald, and I'm a cosplayer. And then I was at an event, and my mentor, the late Carol Hayes, who was at ANU, amazing Japanese scholar, amazing poet, amazing textile scholar in her later years as well. She introduced me to Kotani Mari, who is the first Japanese cosplayer. And I was like, I only knew Kotani Mari for her sci-fi work. I had no idea about her cosplay stuff. And so I'm like, I'm going to meet sci-fi critic Kotani Mari. Wow. And Carol is like, this is Emerald. She's a cosplayer. Emerald, show her your work. And I'm like, oh, okay. But Carol just did things that brought her joy, which I think is really important for young academics, and even people in like your final years of undergrad, looking at honors, looking at masters, looking at PhD, to be allowed to have joy and enjoy what you do, and just find, I think the youths call them glimmers, is just quite incredible. And I love that I know that you've just done an episode on Demon Slayers recently.
Yes.
And the last thing that Carol and I were meant to work on was a book chapter on death, illness, and costume in Demon Slayers.
Oh wow.
So hopefully that will come out at some point.
Yes, please let me know when it does. I'd love to read that.
So I don't know how we got into this tangent, but yeah, joy. Joy is important, and there is some joy to be found in anime.
Yes, absolutely. And the cosplay sort of world interests me because, again, it's something that I've obviously been an anime fan for a very long time, clearly, but cosplay was something I just never gravitated towards. I've always appreciated it. Like, I'm always amazed whenever I go to these conventions. That will be at Smash Convention next weekend, which we're really excited
Yay!
about, and we are, always blown away by the incredible talent on display at all of these events, whether it's Smash, Animanga, Avcon, wherever. Just the talent that's in this country alone, and the things that people do just in their spare time, it's insane. But what I find interesting is that, like most fandoms, I feel that there's kind of different areas in which people gravitate towards. There's the very serious, very like, you must make your own from scratch, and otherwise it's not correct, which we
Who's
see the
one of those
elitism across
nerds?
anime fandoms all the time, right? I don't see this much. Again, I'm not in the fandom
Yep.
per se. But then, of course, you've got those who are doing, as you said before, for joy. But I guess competition is quite interesting because inherently you are being put up against other people and competing. Therefore, how do you sort of find that as something which, I used to find when I was a musician, like in my early days, doing battles of the bands to be kind of strange because it's
Mhm.
like, art versus art, we're foolish to think that competition doesn't exist in art. It does, sadly, because of the capitalist side of things. But yeah, how do you find the more competitive side of cosplay, and how that community sort of liaises with the more casual community?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one thing that's really interesting with Australian cosplay, and I think you asked me this before and I didn't answer it. But we do have regional variations. When I went to New Zealand, I expected New Zealand scene to be exactly like Australia, maybe a little bit smaller, like little cars across the ditch, you know. Chili bin mate. I expected it to be exactly the same. New Zealand, with the work that they do with Weta, with the industry emphasis, there are so many professional technicians in New Zealand, but none of the competitions allow them to compete.
Oh.
If you've graduated from a textile school, from a design school, you're seen as being somebody who's professional, and you cannot join any of the existing cosplay competitions in New Zealand. In Australia, it used to be very split between people who did anime stuff, people who did Western stuff. The divide when WoW was a big thing, when WoW costumes were big, was very evident. Now I think the biggest divide is between your TikTok cosplayers, your competition cosplayers, and your technical cosplayers.
Right.
So if we're talking about, and it sounds derogatory when I say it, but we do have cosplayers who have massive followers on TikTok, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, it's all about making new content, making new costumes, doing new dances. The pace must be exhausting. I have no idea how they do it. It is a full-time job. It's incredible. And I respect the hustle. I am too old to do any of that shit.
Fair enough.
So that's one branch of cosplay. And I think that's inherently linked to casual cosplay, and people who just go to events to dress up and catch up with their friends, and they want to impress each other, maybe get a nice photo. But the competition is not it's not a prize monetary competition. It's a different arena there. And then you have your actual competitions. So I know the Animaga's competition open. You mentioned Smash. And of course, there is the illustrious Smash cosplay competition that is happening there, as well as the heat for the World Cosplay Summit Australia. Australian preliminaries that will also be happening at Smash. I don't know what the applications are like because I'm not working World Cosplay Summit this year. I've stepped away from that because work. But what I've seen of people's progress shots, both of those shows are going to be incredible. So if you are at Smash, do get along to that. Definitely. It's going to be really good. Although I just heard that Smash is sold out for the third year in a row.
Yes, it is.
Which is incredible.
Yes, SmashCon. So good.
To me, Smash is almost the epitome of like an old school anime convention that's managed to move with the times.
Yes.
I really enjoy what they've been doing with that space. It's been a wonderful place to go to as a competitor and also as a showrunner. And so the team's been great to work with. So I guess that kind of brings us to competitive cosplay and the two genders, the two flavors. So you've got your skit competition. At the moment, we're mostly talking about World Cosplay Summit, but then there are also other international competitions. So I got to judge DreamHack. May it rest in peace.
Yes,
so I judged the first Australian round of ECG, the former European, now extreme cosplay gathering. There are a whole bunch of us that bothered the French organisers, like, Ben, I love you, Ben. Australia can go in Eurovision. Can we go in ECG? Ben, I love you, Ben. Ben, please, Ben. And then Vi represented us. Vi and Vampria were our Australian reps, and they came third, which is incredible.
That's crazy.
So these are skit performances, and it's usually in Western cosplay, we're looking at somewhere between 2.5 to 3 minute skits. There may be a backing video, there is probably going to be audio, there's probably going to be music, there's probably going to be stage props. Increasingly, that video, that audio, and that music needs to be made, it needs to be either right free or made by the competitors.
Oh, wow.
So my partner and I did an Akira skit for our World Cosplay
I did see
effort.
that on Instagram. It was very cool.
Yep. Things that you might not know. I thought that I had read the 2024 World Cosplay Summit rules. I gave them to my Japanese colleague to read. We thought that we were fine. Then we reread them. We were not fine.
Oh, no.
Luckily, my cosplay partner is also a musician. So she wrote a score of Akira-inspired marimba music.
On the fly.
On the fly.
Oh, my God.
So she composed all of our music and sound effects.
Wow.
And then I had another friend who I commissioned to do the backing video. And then I made the sets, and we took a bike to Japan, as you do. So, so that's your kind of competition skit. I say that's what most Western cosplay skits are like, because if we look at places like CCP, Taiwan, Hong Kong, we're looking at like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, even longer.
Oh, wow.
Pre-recorded, everything made by a team. So in your World Cosplay Summit style skits, everything's made by the competitors, at least 70, 80%. So not just the costume, but also the audio, music, etc.
Wow.
When we're looking at Chinese cosplay and that kind of region of the world, they have teams. So you'll have a person who will be the cosplayer, and then you'll have a person who'll be the makeup, a wig artist, a writer, music, cutters, fabric. So something much more akin to a stage show.
Which has behind it.
Yeah. And so that has led to some interesting questions during judging when those two worlds combine.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's really interesting to see, regional differences of how cosplay works. There's a big difference between what happens here and what happens in America, and what happens here and what happens in Europe. We all look very similar, but there are different things that are acceptable, different ways that characters are cosplayed, and I think different intentions behind. So in North America, you see a lot more OC, or original character cosplay. You didn't really see that in Australia until very recently.
Really?
Yeah. No, in Australia, it's mostly been... So if you went to an anime convention, you'd wear an anime character.
Yes.
If you went to a gaming convention like PAX or TGX, then you're going to be wearing a gaming outfit.
Yep.
And so the other divide that we have is with technical walk-on costumes. So PAX, Crown, CTU2, Oz Comic Cons. So those are technical walk-ons. You walk on, you do a little pose. Hopefully somebody says nice things about your costume. You walk off. Hopefully you don't fall over. There are interesting rules that have been developed. Like your costume must be able to go upstairs and get on stage after people have had costumes that couldn't walk upstairs or go on stage.
Trapped in a door frame. Yep.
Most cosplay rules for competitions, apart from like your initial like copyright rules or whatever, a lot of them, if you know the law, you can go through and go, oh, that was when that person wore that costume and did this thing.
Can trace it to individuals.
Yeah.
It's incredibly interesting. And what trends have you seen emerge? So the OC thing is something that's newly emerging in Australia in the scene?
For me, I trace it back to the rise of tabletop and D&D cosplays. So Critical Role has, of course, been a massive influence in that. I may have just been one of the idiots who went to Melbourne in full cosplay to watch nerdy voice actors do maths in full costume.
Amazing. It did look amazing.
It was great, but I feel like there's been a kind of rise in people cosplaying their own D&D characters, their own TTRPG characters, which I don't think we've seen before the rise of that. Before it was very much existing IP. I guess the one exception would be with the WoW, back in the WoW cosplay days,
Yeah.
where you might cosplay, your character that you've genned and customized within that game.
Sure. Interesting. And you're saying the post-COVID generation, you think that's where this OC thing is sort of popping up? Because I guess also tabletop RPGs blew up during COVID because it was one of the few things you could do over Zoom. It's when I first played D&D was over Zoom with my friends because I was actually in Tasmania at the time, and
Yep.
was my friend was like, "Hey, I've always wanted to run a D&D campaign. Let's do it." And we all did it and it was fantastic. But yeah, I guess you could maybe talk more about the post-COVID generation and what we're seeing emerge with the current generation, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and admittedly, this is I'm very much in my pass me my Zimmer frame, old cosplayer shakes at yells at cloud era. But I feel like for people who came through, who started doing cosplays on TikTok again, in Tasmania shut her borders. You weren't going anywhere. When I was working at La Trobe at the time that COVID happened, and to actually get into Tasmania, I had to ring the state controller and ask for permission.
Wow.
Which was terrifying because it was half an hour before my flight and I still hadn't got a phone call. It was a very interesting time, but I think that's also when TikTok cosplay became big because you could dress up in your home, do little anime dances, do makeup, and we actually see quite a worldwide phenomenon of people doing like home cosplays.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that starts. Ed Hoff has written about home cosplay in Japan.
Right.
So I do think we can link it to COVID, but for me, and there are others who have recognized this as well, without having the grounding of going to events and knowing what an event looked like before then, the expectations of what an event should offer have changed so much. I mean, we went again, and it clutches Zimmer frame, yells at cloud. Early cosplay competitions, you'd get an A4 piece of paper. Maybe I have a friend who likes to describe it as an A4 certificate, volume 3 of Naruto, and a pat on the head. Now we have so much more emphasis on the monetary value of prizes, international trips, the ability to represent Australia, and also an expectation of what is owed to somebody who is cosplaying at an event.
Yes,
and it's very easy for me to sound negative about these, but coming from an aged perspective. But I do find it very interesting that I did a survey of cosplay and convention event runners back in 2013. And I remember one of the event runners coming back and being like, "Oh yeah, cosplayers, they're really annoying. They get in the way. They take up space. They don't do anything apart from take photos of each other. Cosplayers are the worst thing about conventions."
Oh wow!
So that was a common.
Really, 2013.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. Times have changed.
I am. I mean, yes and no. What has changed is back in the day, like events didn't want cosplayers because we were noisy, we took up space. We'd LobbyCon instead of paying for tickets. But brightly colored people are a draw card. They're always good, good background footage for news crosses.
100%.
Great for advertising material. So there was a little bit of a symbiotic relationship.
Sure. Interesting.
And I think now there's an expectation that there'll be a cosplay center, there'll be a lounge, somebody like Captain Patchett, or somewhere to take photos. There'll be a photo wall. There'll be somewhere for cosplayers to rest. There's an expectation that people will respect cosplayers, that they're not treated like Disney characters, that they're treated like people who are paying patrons. They're not there to entertain anybody unless they're on stage in a competition.
Yeah.
And this is a very different attitude. And I think for a lot, in a lot of cases, it's really good. It's really good that we have people like Captain Patcher supporting cosplayers.
Totally.
It's really good that people understand that just because a cosplayer is dressed as your favorite waifu does not mean that you get to touch them or
Yes.
take photos of them without their permission.
Yes. Yes. It's something we see come up a lot because we obviously we interview cosplayers every year at Smash and the various conventions we attend to do our event coverage, and I see quite a few of the cosplayers we follow on Instagram post these kinds of things every year. Unfortunately, basically being like,
Yeah.
"Hey, like, how many times do I have to say this? Come on, like, you should all understand etiquette a bit better by
Mm.
now." You know, and I mean, I saw just recently it was someone from The Boys. I think she plays Firecracker,
Mhm.
and she had a huge thing recently, basically being like, this one person just came up and just wouldn't stop and was so inappropriate and it was so horrendous. And, you know, she basically had to do a huge speech of being like, don't do this. Don't do, why would you? It's not funny. It's not clever. It's embarrassing and made her feel terribly uncomfortable. She's like, she's famous. You know,
Mm.
I imagine this sort of thing does unfortunately happen quite a lot. And perhaps I can't, I'm hoping that a lot of it's just like perhaps missing social cues as opposed to just being outwardly malicious. But again, it's one of those things which is, I guess, an unfortunate reality of conventions and how they play out sometimes.
I mean, there used to be the maxim that the best thing about nerd and geek spaces is that they welcome everybody.
Mm.
The worst thing about nerd and geek spaces is that they welcome everybody.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Yeah, yeah,
But I think the Wild Wild West days have passed,
yep.
and if COVID hadn't happened, I think we would be in a very different space. I
Interesting.
think, um, like Madman 2019 is one of my favorite events ever. I got to run backstage at the Madman Cosplay Championship, which I've got a full set of silverware for Madman back there.
Oh wow,
Um, full set, full set for Madman and World Cosplay Summit Australia.
that's so cool.
But I think we were on track to not answer all the questions, but have better answers. And I do think that there is a lack of understanding. There is a lack of etiquette. We also live in a society, and that society is influenced by certain social mores,
Yes.
by, shall we say, certain internet personalities.
Yep. Yep.
And there is overlap within, again, nerd and geek spaces,
Big time.
those kind of internet personalities.
Yes, yes, yes. It's an unfortunate reality, and I guess the great thing about a convention is it is a melting pot of all different kinds of people who would never otherwise interact, which is
Mhm.
wonderful. But also means you're with people you would otherwise never interact, and perhaps
Yeah.
there's a reason for that sometimes.
I mean, the event that I've been working on as a research project lately is the Icon Cosplay Photo Festival. It runs in September down here in Tasmania.
Cool.
And one thing that I'm really conscious of is that is an 18 plus event, because I don't want to send somebody underage off into the woods with a photographer that they've never met before.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So we're very conscious when we match our cosplayers to their photographers.
Yes.
It is mostly random, but we're also conscious about who we accept into the event. We try and vet our photographers as much as possible. We also vet our cosplayers, because just as photographers can have red flags, cosplayers can have red flags.
For sure.
So we try and vet everybody. And the one thing that I really encourage all participants is to make sure that they have a helper. A helper
Yep.
is great on a shoot. They can be the person who looks out for flyaway wig hairs. They can tell if you've got 5 chins instead of 1. They can help you with posing if you're looking awkward. They can hold things like reflectors, lights, make sure that they're cape flipping, but they can also act as chaperones,
Yes. Yes.
which is really important.
Totally.
So there is a duty of care for an event like a photo fest, which, yes, there is a duty of care for a cosplay competition or a photo wall. But at the end of the day, there's all that time on the either side of those events. A cosplay competition, unless it's something like World Cosplay Summit where you have prejudging on different days and you need to be backstage to build things, it's only a couple of hours out of your day.
Yes,
And a lot can happen outside of those event parameters.
this is true. So something I wanted to ask as well, because I think there's an element of cosplay which I think gets misrepresented and unfairly so stigmatized, perhaps, in the same way that anime does, manga does. There is an element of cosplay deliberately hypersexualized, right? And so the OnlyFans crossover, all that sort
Mhm.
of thing. And even, I mean, one of the most famous cosplayers in the world, Jessica Negri, is of course, deliberately uh, sexualized sort of costumes, and it's like
Yep.
totally cool. It's absolutely a part of the cosplay world which is very deliberate and a whole part of the community. But I do think a lot of the time there's an unfair stigmatization that is say, well, all cosplay is inherently pornographic, which is obviously a foolish thing for anyone to think. But as we learn in the anime community, a lot of the times people have that preconception and it's very hard to battle it.
Yeah. There's a couple of ways to think of this, and I think it comes at the end of the day. It comes back to rules. In my academic work, I mostly look at competition cosplay purely because if you've entered a competition, you've offered yourself up to be judged. So that for me feels slightly more ethical than looking at people who have gone to an event to have fun.
Yep, totally.
But you know, sexy cosplay is goes hand in hand with cosplay. You mentioned Jessica Negri, Yaya Han. She started off at events selling her own anime art and illustrations. Her book, Yaya Han's World of Cosplay, has one of the best rundowns of the history of cosplay in the US
Wow.
and in parts of Europe as well, and any academic work I've read. If you want a history of the Australian scene, I have a chapter in a book. I think there are a couple of honours theses and master's theses, but that is an area that needs study.
Mm.
But I bring up Yaya Han because she was also doing pin-up work to make ends meet
Mm-hmm.
before she launched her cosplay empire. At one point, I remember she made an April Fool's Facebook page called Yaya Han's Boobies because the harassment was at the point where people were saying, you're only famous because of your chest size. You're not talented. You just have a large cup size. And that was before OnlyFans. That was before Patreon. That was, when you had to actually look for porn. You couldn't just find it on a GIF search.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the world has changed a lot. I think abstinence culture is detrimental. I think certain internet personalities have led us to a place, to a precipice. And I do think that sexy cosplay definitely has a part in cosplay, but it also has a distinct place, right?
Yes.
You're not going to, there are very few people who are going to rock up to an event in an OnlyFans
Yes.
suitable cosplay,
Yes.
unless, certain, 18, there used to be 18 plus cosplay events. Sexpo had a cosplay competition.
Yeah. Wow.
There were 18 plus cosplay competitions at one of the tattoo exhibitions that was at Melbourne. I remember one year. I only remember that because I was cross-dressed as Gladio from Final Fantasy 15. And I remember standing in the toilets in my fake man chest with my tattoo when one of the tattoo artists walked in, looked at me drawing on my beard, said, "This is too weird," and walked out. I think cosplay only makes sense in certain spaces.
Yes.
Right? It makes sense on the event stage. It
Yes.
makes sense at a convention.
Yep.
It makes sense on a whatever a TikTok short is called.
Yep.
Sexy cosplay makes sense on Patreon,
Yep.
on OnlyFans.
Yes.
And there is a certain frisson, there is a certain excitement that happens when you take cosplay out of places where it makes sense. So that used to be a big thing that if you were in Melbourne and you were going to an event, you would purposefully go to an event in costume to ride the trams or go to Macca's and get a Big Mac dressed as Inuyasha because it's hilarious.
Totally.
It's a very Australian experience and a very New Zealand experience. Most conventions in the States are hotel cons, so you're only going from your hotel room to the convention floor.
Interesting, because that's not a thing in Australia, is it?
It's really not a thing. I
Yeah.
guess the closest you'd be is if you stay at the Novotel or the Pan Pacific for an event in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But so Diana Binksy of World Cosplay Summit and Holomat describes it as like an adult slumber party. Because like you're going to events during the day. If it's something that's got after dark events, you're going to those, you're drinking, you're dressing up, you're cramming 15 people in a room. Good times. But like not really something you can imagine happening in Australia.
No.
In Japan, you are absolutely not allowed to show up to an event in costume. You will be barred. Yeah. So Comiket, biggest Dorjian circle event in the world, does have cosplay events. You buy a entry ticket, and you also buy a cosplay ticket, and you buy a change room ticket. And so you go to the event, you show your tickets, you go into the dressing room, you change. Most Japanese cosplayers will have like a little carry-on suitcase that they can put all their makeup and everything in. And then you go from that changing room to the designated cosplay area. And what's really interesting is in Australia, if we think of a photo wall, the photographer is there and then the cosplayers all line up and have their photos taken, right?
Yep.
Places like Comiket, the cosplayer will find a spot and they'll just stand there. They might have like a sign up with their handle or their name, and the photographers will just line up to take photos.
Interesting.
And it is an absolute scrum, particularly for like the hot girls, the popular, the new popular anime, whatever has come out and is like new that year.
Yep.
And so it's an absolute scrum. The one exception to this, and this has only happened post 2020, is Nagoya wants to be the city of cosplay. So Nagoya is where the World Cosplay Summit is held. And for the days of the World Cosplay Summit, you are allowed to walk the streets in cosplay.
Wow.
Now, the very first cosplay summit that I went to was 2010. I was a student in Tokyo and I caught a Shinkansen at some ungodly hour in the morning. Cosplayers were not allowed in stores. They weren't even allowed to pee in costume. Wow. And this is when World Cosplay Summit was on a stage in the middle of a shopping center. So I don't know how you keep cosplayers out of shops. And it's 38 degrees, but cosplayers are not allowed in shops. They have to get out of costume to go into a convenience store, get changed again to go and be cosplayers. So that was 2010.
Wow.
2017, the first year that I worked World Cosplay Summit, I volunteered 17, 18, 19. And then I worked remotely 2021, 22. You've got slowly more events, more shops allowing cosplayers in. I remember getting my morning Starbucks with my with my World Cosplay Summit shirt on. And then when I went in the afternoon to get my afternoon coffee, they changed all the whiteboards to be like, "We love World Cosplay Summit." And then when we were there last year representing, I think our team's about to go up beginning of August. Very exciting.
Indeed.
A couple of AMU's Idol and Brisbane cosplayers. Brisbane's very strong for World Cosplay Summit.
Cool.
So yeah, they're going to be amazing. Lots of One Piece.
Cool.
But by the time they get up there, I presume that they'll bring back this freedom where cosplayers can kind of enter stores, and yeah, it's really special.
It's really interesting too, because I think there is, speaking of misconceptions, I think a lot of people think, especially when they haven't been to Japan, they're like, oh, well, you just go to Akihabara and people are just walking around in cosplay. It's just not reality. I'm sorry to disappoint people who haven't been to Akihabara, but you get maids on the street trying to ask you into maid cafes, but
yep,
it's not just a land of cosplay, and like even in places like Akihabara. And yeah, I think that is interesting as well, because the fact that they weren't even allowed to do it in public at all during the event, it's very, very interesting how differently everyone does it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the maid. So because I am aged, I can remember going to Akiba back when it was Denden Electrical Town, and it was a
Yes.
space for appliance and tech nerds before the otaku moved in, or before the anime otaku moved in. I'm like it's a different flavor of otaku. But yeah, and it's the same with places like Harajuku. A lot of the street fashion that was there has been moved on because of commerce, because of tourists. And there have been whole industries that have come out of that. So maid cafes, cosplay cafes. There are Miko Shrine Maiden cafes, which are great because they walk in and they yell at you, Master is like a god. And it's great. You get to, I mean, all of these cafes, they work on the kind of the host model. So whether it's hosts, hostesses, cosplays, cats, hedgehogs, owls, you walk in, you get a book, you make your selection, then you pay money for the company of something beautiful, usually while eating not good food.
Yes, very true.
That's one good thing about butler cafes is that the food is slightly better because the clientele is usually femme presenting.
But so going back to sort of the origins of cosplay itself, it did come out of Japan. Was this sort of emergence? Is that correct, or is that a misconception as well?
Sorry. This is something that has been. There are various schools of thought.
Can imagine.
It used to be that you would say that cosplay was coined by Nobu Takahashi, who went to Sci-Fi Con in, I think it was San Francisco in 83 or 84. And when he came back, he wrote a piece about it, and words, the American words, things like masquerade, things like costume, were too long to put in Japanese because, of course, you have to spell those out phonetically. Masukeredo. It's like it's a 7-character word. It's a lot. If you think of if you're typing by character, that's a lot of characters in your byline.
Oh yeah.
And so he coined the word cosplay.
Right.
More recent studies have found slightly earlier mentions of cosplay that predate Takahashi's journal article that came out. And then you have claims that fanish cosplay starts with, it used to be with 4E. 4E was a member of the early sci-fi cons. He was famous for wearing the first fantasy costume to a sci-fi event. And then it came out that it wasn't 4E, it was Moroyo, his then partner, who made all of the costumes because, of course, can't credit women in nerd fandoms. And so Moroyo was actually the mother of cosplay. And then we have people who claim that, no, it was a 1901 in rural America with Mr. Skygak costumes. Skygak was Mr. Skygak from Mars was a newspaper, like a little newspaper strip cartoon. And apparently there was a spate of people who dressed up as Mr. Skygak from Mars and made nuisances of themselves in rural America. There are people who link the act of cosplay to Venetian Carnevale. But I think if you're going to talk about Venice and Carnevale, then you may as well talk about Tudor masks in the 1600s in England, or Vestal virgins in Greece, ancient Greece, dressing up as gods and goddesses, Commedia dell'arte. I think at the end of the day, humans are just fascinated with dressing up as their heroes. In a modern day when, there are very few occasions for us to dress up as gods, goddesses, demons, and devils, cosplay has filled that void.
Totally. It's interesting because Charlie and my grandmother actually ran a fancy dress shop chain. Well, not a chain. It was her own store. She had multiple stores in Perth called Apparition back in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so cool. It was like So both of us sort of grew up around fancy dress. Like I said, I never got into the cosplay thing.
Mhm.
Charlie did a little bit in the early days of like anime conventions in WA. Never took it very seriously, I don't think. I mean, she might be upset at me for saying that, but I think it's a pretty fair thing to say. Charlie never took it super seriously. But it is just a fascinating thing because dressing up has been around us forever. And like Gran used to have this place in the 90s, and fancy dress parties were commonplace. It was just a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Not
There wasn't a
anymore.
house party that I went to as an undergrad that didn't have a theme, that wasn't, you'd dress up, you'd make something out of either going to Vinnie's or the Salvos.
Yep.
We call that a closet cosplay nowadays. But, like you'd make your costume from whatever you could, bed sheets,
Yep.
your own or your housemates. And you'd go to a house party. I can remember watching my students in New Zealand on toga night in O Week,
Yep.
where they'd all walk through Wellington in their sheets, varying degrees of sanitary. You could tell who had a partner by how clean the sheets were.
Yes.
But not to make aspersions or assumptions.
Of course.
But like I do think that the gentle art of dressing up without penalty, without being judged,
Yes.
has disappeared. But I also think, as we're increasingly pressured to be productive, to gamify, to get the hustle, to do every single second, I think that there are very few hobbies that you can do without penalty.
Yes.
So I feel maybe fancy dress parties have been a casualty of that.
I think you're right. I think you're dead right. Which is a damn shame because they were super fun.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I could always rock up to a fancy dress party and kill it because I had an entire shop at my disposal, which was very helpful. Emerald, thank you so much for joining me. This has been absolutely fascinating. I could talk about this for hours. In fact, I'd love to get you back on again another time, and with Charlie as well, because this has just been incredible. And thank you so much for your time. And where can people find your work, and what are you working on at the moment? Take a moment to...
Ooh, okay. So I am Emerald L. King across most social media. You can either... Actually, if you search my name, one of three things will come up. It will either be me, it will be a certain brand of weed killer, or it will be a certain brand of sexy elf romance stories.
Okay.
Not written by me. But yeah, so I'm Emerald L. King across most social media. I have a website, www.emeraldlking.com, or you can find all of my academic work at the UTAS website. What am I working on at the moment? I actually have a book chapter that I owe my co-authors on Ribbon no Kishi, Princess Knight, and Sleeves. So that's what I will be working on.
Got you. Fantastic. And yeah, this has been so fantastic, and something I haven't actually talked about on the podcast before. I'm currently also doing a master's thesis with the aforementioned Dr. Masafumi Monden, who we are both very friends with, and he's currently my supervisor on this. And I'm actually analyzing how anime streaming service Anime Lab changed the culture of anime fandom in Australia. So just wanted to, now Charlie's not here to roll her eyes at me, I'm just letting you all know that's something that I'm doing. And thank you so much for all your help as well, because at the start of the year I did attend a symposium with Emerald, which Dr. Masafumi Monden ran, and it was an incredible time, and loved hearing you speak. And once again today.
And then you had to sit through half an hour of me telling you what you should do for your masters.
And it was incredibly helpful. Let me tell you. It saved me a lot of time, I can tell you that. It's been fantastic. So thank you, and thank you all for joining us. As always, you can, of course, find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where hopefully you're watching this. Otherwise, of course, if you're listening, you can give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Really does make a big difference to help get it into more people's ears. So Emerald, thank you so much. It's been incredible. And hey, everyone, hope you enjoyed that. Incredibly informative. And I'll catch you all next time. All the best.